Well, last night there was a terrific Mavericks debate on Sky News between Pauline Hanson, Campbell Newman, Bob Catter and Clive Palmer. But one line from Palmer, which is blasted out there in the newspapers and billboards all around the country, is about some nonsense, keeping mortgage rates at 3%. Now, it's complete and utter rubbish that he can do that, and it's a desperate ploy. I'd have to say it's almost vote buying. To discuss this and debunk this mortgage myth, no less than a maverick himself joins me now, Leader of New South Wales One Nation, Mark Latham. Mark, you and I both know that governments don't dictate to banks what that mortgage rate should be. So how does Palmer get away with it?
Well, he shouldn't, Peter. It's a strange, counterproductive policy. People need to appreciate that until the COVID hit and we had a recession, Australia had the longest period of economic growth in global economic history, nearly 30 years, an unprecedented level of economic expansion and wealth creation. And one of the essential pillars of that success was independent monetary policy, that the Reserve Bank has a charter of keeping underlying inflation between 2 and 3%, and they set the cash rate at 0.1%, as we now know, of course, everyone knows that, and that obviously has a big influence on the mortgage interest rate. So what Clive Palmer is saying is you're going to take that lever away, peg mortgage rates at 3%, which means Australia would be defenceless, have no real mechanism to fight rising inflation. Inflation is rising in Australia, certainly rising in the United States rapidly. In Europe, we've got the energy crisis because of renewables and the Ukraine, so those prices are going up. So Palmer's policy really is a recipe for double-digit inflation in Australia, which we haven't seen for a long, long while, and that would send real wages backwards. It would wipe out any gains people had on their mortgage and run the risk of an inflationary spiral that we've got well past. So it's a disastrous policy. It should be rejected, and it's the sort of loopy thing that Palmer suggests without any real thought or analysis.
Yeah, but vulnerable people, you and I know, worried about the talk of a rate rise in the middle of the year, will see his advertisement and think he's the only guy that's going to be able to stop their mortgage going up. Even if he won government, he's not going to win government, he'll be lucky to get a seat. Even if he won government, he can't do that.
Well, even if he had the balance of power, no mainstream party would embrace that policy. It's a mirage for mortgage holders, for home buyers, to say if it's pegged, you'd be much worse off with your grocery shopping. For fixed income earners and pensioners, it's a disaster to go to double-digit inflation. I mean, at the moment, the big economic risk we have in Australia, where we haven't had any significant wage increases for 20 years, is the inflation bear out of its cage. And you need to put it back in. You can't put it back in if you get rid of independent monetary policy with the Reserve Bank. So this is the very worst time in Australia's economic history to embrace this wacky Palmer idea.
All right, let's go to some other issues. There's infighting now inside the New South Wales Liberal Party all around Katherine Deves. I think a lot of Australians support her position about fair sport for women and girls, but Matt Kean, Felicity Wilson, state MPs, well, they're raging against her still. She's had support today from the Premier. She's had support, strong support from the Prime Minister. I played that at the top of the show. But just before I came on air, Matt Kean was interviewed by my colleague Chris Kenny. Have a listen.
We can have these debates and we should have them robustly, but there is a line, and I think hate speech or hurtful speech is inappropriate in our public discourse. We can be better than that. You and I are having a very robust discussion here, Chris, and that's what we want in our democracy, but there are ways to carry it out, and I'm saying I don't think the way that individual carried out this debate was appropriate or helpful in the public discourse.
It's a gross exaggeration to call.
I've got a long political memory, and I think it's a bit rich for Kean to be giving people instructions on respectful debate and good behaviour.
Absolutely, Peter. If we reviewed some of the text messages he sent back in the day to one of his female state parliamentary colleagues that caused his then partner, who was being cheated on, to erupt and put it into the media, you can, on the basis of unacceptable language, and get rid of Katherine Deves, but Matt Kean would have to go with her. You can disendorse them both. So this guy is a hypocrite. He's a Green Liberal. He's playing some weird, moderate factional game there on the North Shore of Sydney about Deves. saying it's all about language. But the unfortunate thing in the New South Wales government, believe it or not, Kean has the numbers with this left-wing moderate faction, and he's got Dominic Perrottet in a political coffin. He's got Perrottet captive to these numbers. And apparently Kean is allowed to go out and say whatever he likes about any issue, on any occasion, running loose, breaking all forms of cabinet solidarity and common sense inside the Liberal Party in the middle of a federal election campaign, and it's building up enormous resentment, I can tell you, among Liberals, the backbench and the like, who think, well, why can't someone control this guy?
I tell you what, you're right. If he thinks that Katherine Deves' comments, for which she has apologised, disqualify her from high office, then he should already be gone. And that's the standard that he needs to uphold. Talk to me about this leaders' debate. It's coming up. You've been there as opposition leader. I've been there with an opposition leader for 2 separate rounds of debates. It's pretty easy for Albanese. I mean, everybody's got such a low threshold of what he needs to do to succeed. How will it go tonight?
Yeah, it's all about expectations. For Albanese, a draw is like a win. For Scott Morrison, a draw is a loss. But, Peter, it's very unpredictable. You know, one of the paradoxes of John Howard's record was he could never win a debate. He lost them to Beazley, he lost the one that he had with me. And when we walked out to the lectern, I was, you know, obviously a much younger man, new to it, and a bit nervous. But I saw Howard on the other lectern was trembling, was shaking, which made me feel a lot better and sort of calmed me down. And it turned out I had a good debate. So it's very unpredictable. But if one of them is overridden and riven with nerves, then you make mistakes, you lose your confidence, and that's an unknown factor as to how comfortable they'll be in the forum, answering the questions not only from Kieran Gill but from the audience on the floor.
I can tell you I was nervous as a staff of every one of those debates, but we'll watch it closely tonight. Mark Latham, thank you. Thank you for your time.